That's right, the title of this video is not clickbait. I designed a unique relic for Hellclock. And so in this video, I'm going to talk about how that happened, some of my thought process going into the design, and then I'm going to end things with a little bit of a showcase of what it can do. This has been an absolutely awesome experience, and it started back when I was asked to play patch 1.1, specifically the PTR, and give some feedback. So I jumped in, I played some builds, and as I went through different difficulties, I gave my thoughts on the balance. Where was I struggling? What was easy? When did I get absolutely wrecked by the matriarch, and was that because she was overtuned or because I was bad at the game? Spoiler alert, it was a bit of both. And so, to say thank you, Mark and the team at Rogue Snail, the developer behind the game, wanted to do something for myself and a couple of the other community testers. They decided on letting each of us design a unique relic that becomes part of the game. And this is just super special because Hellclock is a game made with a lot of heart. In a lot of ways, it feels very personal to the people who worked on it. So this kind of feels like the developers inviting me into their home and saying, hey, you have a room here anytime you need. I couldn't be more honored, and I've absolutely loved every minute I played a Hellclock. And so then I got thinking, what sort of item do I want? I wanted it to be something that reflected the things that I like in games. And I also wanted it to be something where, if you have never heard of me before, you don't know what Tenkiei means or who I am, you wouldn't go, well, that's just a weird item, I don't know why this exists. You'd go, that's fucking cool. So the first thing I decided is it was going to be Cast on Crit. Why? I have played Cast on Crit in Path of Exile. I've played Cast on Crit in other ARPGs and ARPG-like games. I've always found it fun. I mean, who doesn't want to fill the screen with a whole bunch of spells? And so my first thought was, Cast on Crit Veil of Quills. Why? Veil of Quills is one of my favorite skills. The thing is, it's already really strong. Do I really need to add another way to play Veil of Quills? A better way to play Veil of Quills? No, I wanted something that's a little different, a little underserved. But I thought, what about melee? Because there aren't very many melee skills. There's Double Knives, classic spin to win. There's Fator's Lash. There's Brute, which it's melee, but also at the time, patch 1.1, Brute wasn't really a thing. And then there's Lasso, which is more of a support skill. You're typically not playing a Lasso build. And yes, I know someone in the chat just said, challenge accepted, I'm playing a Lasso build now. Good luck to you, please let me know how it goes. So I decided melee, but there was that coolness factor. Because we've got Cast and Crit, we've got melee, how do we make it cool? Well, you drop meteors on things, because meteors are awesome. And it turns out there's a skill in Hellclock called Matadera. I'm sorry if I've mispronounced that, I probably have. Which drops a giant fireball on enemies. Enter Tenkiei's Skyhammer, a relic that allows you to cast Matadera on melee crit. And to add some new mechanics to the game, to move the design of Hellclock forward a little bit, do something interesting, new, and unique, it changes the tag from Marksman over to Melee. This was not only to avoid the problem of having to scale a whole bunch of Marksman damage and also Melee damage, but also to avoid the problem of a balancing nightmare. Because the last thing I want is to create a balancing nightmare for the devs when there's this thing that's triggered by Melee that's also Marksman, and so they buff Marksman skills because maybe in the future they're underperforming, and then all of a sudden this becomes OP. Because this converts over to Melee, it only scales off of Melee, and because it has a cooldown, I did my best to not create problems for the devs and game balance in the future. Fingers crossed if that succeeds, because I honestly have no idea. And so there you have it. You can play a Skyhammer build, you can drop meteors on enemies' heads, and it's a new melee Cast on Crit archetype. I am super pleased with how the item came out. The very first thing I did after patch 1.2 dropped is I immediately went into a new Ascension. Yes, I know, probably not the best way to get a specific item, but I did it, and on my very first run in Act 3, I got the drop. I immediately exited out of a run. Who cares? Like, one attempt lost. It is time to play Cast on Crit Meteor. And it's awesome. One fun little side effect of Matadera converting over to melee, it leaves a big old fire damage over time puddle because of how that works in the game. As it ticks, it deals damage. That damage can actually crit, thus triggering more meteors. So yes, it does trigger itself. This is not a problem for the game because it has a cooldown. You can't really remove the cooldown, which is a good thing. But it does also mean you can drop fire puddles that drop more meteors on your enemies, which is really fun on bosses and gives you nice sustained DPS if you happen to move. I took it in, I absolutely blasted everything. It's awesome, and I cannot wait to make more builds. Which, speaking of, let's head in game and talk about the build in a few more details. So to start off, here's a little bit of gameplay. You might notice that as I'm using Fator's Lash, while the outline of the meteor does spawn, most things are dead before the Matadera actually drops directly on top of them. This is probably because I have a fair bit of damage and I'm on a low ascension because I restarted my ascensions after the patch. However, on shrines and rares or bosses, it is particularly noticeable. Just look at how much the meteors are flooding the screen. So here's just a little bit of gameplay, completely uncut.
Fé no belo monge que trouxe instrumento iluminado.
Okay, next I'm going to talk about a few of the mechanics that I'm using on the build. Starting with skills. Of course, Matadera, this is the big old meteor skill, and in particular, the reason that you want to put it on your bars, you don't have to for it to trigger anything, but you do have to take blessings, and you definitely want blessings, things like increased area of effect, increased damage, reduced impact delay. Next up, Judgment, this is Res Shred, pretty good. Since this is specifically an Ignite version, the ailment duration from Judgment is also really good, another reason to have it on your bars for the global buff from ranks. Prayer of Vengeance should be pretty self-explanatory, but when playing a cast on crit build, you want to be able to crit. Specifically, I went for a version that has a higher level Prayer of Vengeance for the bigger passive buff, rather than to hit it actively, because I found I didn't need to actually actively hit it all that often. Then, Fator's Lash. This can be any triggering melee skill, but specifically because of the Shackle, this is the highest damage version, and I was a Fator's Lash Ignite build before I got the Skyhammer to drop. And then last up, movement skill of choice, which in this case is Shadow Dash, because I was thinking of doing a melee relic Shadow Dash so I could just dash around as a build alternative, and not enough time to do that in this Ascension run, but I'm definitely going to experiment with that in the future. For gear, pretty much just junk that I picked up off the floor. Base damage is good, could be Ignite damage, Life Leech, getting some res, life, general defensive stats, of course, movement speed on boots. Nothing too special here. If you've geared a character, you've probably seen it before, and also, this is Ascension, so I don't exactly get infinite resources to fish for things. Then we've got Relics. The core of a build is, of course, a Skyhammer. This item is awesome, and it just makes me smile every time I look at it. In addition to Riri's Law, 50% multiplicative Ignite damage. Really good if you're playing an Ignite build. Settle the Score. Good for Fator's Lash, especially with the increased area of effect. Small Coffee, good for dropping extra meteors on enemies. 56% increased damage, and the +2 charges are quite handy on bosses. Northerner Belt to cast Lasso automatically, plus I rolled max agility orb, so I can't really take it off. Burning Shackles, this is where the build gets a huge amount of its damage, because this way, the Fator's Lash consumes Ignite to deal way more upfront damage. Ignore the marksman skill stuff that just happened to roll, and then I ran out of resources because Ascension. Bundle of Rope, if I'm going to be using Lasso, might as well apply Lifelink, makes it easy to melt stuff. And Bundle of Syringes, which is a whole bunch of melee damage, and remember, that scales Matadera, because with this build, it gains the melee tag. So, really good way to scale damage. Then for everything else, I was just looking for things like Ignite damage, melee damage, and all res. Ignore this, it was just for the attack speed, because I had one slot, and I figured might as well. Now, for Constellations, this is not optimal in any way. In fact, I had to do some shenanigans. The first thing I did is actually take Agam, and use that to take all of Guaraki. Again, I apologize, I'm probably butchering most of these pronunciations. So, I went over here, then I went up here. I wanted the agility orbs for the attack and move speed, especially now for the new animation system. It feels really good to have high attack and high move speed. Then I grabbed a 4-point Constellation. That was just to get enough Discipline Devotion. That was just to get some Discipline Devotion so I could come over here for Sword of Wind and Storms. 30% multiplicative melee damage. Also some pretty nice evasion bonuses, that I don't really get to take advantage of that much because I don't have that much evasion scaling. But hey, wind stacks are more melee damage, so it's fine. I just melt stuff. And then I put 1 faith point in. Again, kind of doing some leapfrogging because I put points here, then I took them out, put points here, then I put points here, then I put points here, then took them out, put points here. Then I ended up over here. So Ignite scales with crit damage. This is a cast on crit build. It's going to be stacking crit chance and crit damage anyway. It made sense to scale the Ignite that way. If you plan to play this build for yourself, don't take this as super gospel, and I'm just going to go through the leapfrogs here because they're a bit complicated. So 1, 2, 3. It is not actually ideal to take the sun. I don't really want lasso eating my dawnlight, but no option right now. 4, 5, 6, like so. Then drop all of these points. Then add this, take out this, add this, take out this, and put it back into the Fury Devotion. And that's the end result. So again, huge thanks to the Hellclock team and to Mark for allowing me to design this item. It is just awesome. I'm not expressing this well because I don't know what to say beyond I'm honored. And I'm just really glad that I was able to do this. Yeah, that's your obligatory sappy me lost for words part of a video. Yeah, thank you, and to everyone out there who plays Hellclock, enjoy, make some cool builds. Let me know down in the comments what you do. Also, please don't crash the game with it. If you do find a way, report that so it can be fixed.